Because qualifications count more than money.
Because my vote is earned, not bought.
Because grassroots power can stop big money.
Because Jamie has always been a progressive.
Because literally, Jamie Raskin wrote the book on campaign finance reform.
And Jamie's the only candidate who's done more than talk.
Because he's the only one who's actually written major progressive laws.
To pass the Green Maryland Act.
To ban military-style assault weapons in Maryland.
Ban the death penalty.
Pass equal pay for women.
Marriage equality for all.
Because no other candidate has that kind of record.
And it's not even close.
Because Jamie Raskin is one of the coolest, smartest, kindest, most passionate candidates I've ever seen.
Because my vote is not for sale.
And we need the kind of progressive that money can't buy.
Because Jamie Raskin represents us.
The U.S. has added 14 million new jobs since the Great Recession. A good start. But too many families see the special interests gaining the upper hand in Washington, while paychecks don't go far enough. If you work hard, your paycheck should show it. You earn Social Security. It should be there when you retire. And you shouldn't have to go broke to afford college. I'm Katie McGinty, and I approve this message because it's your turn.
Brothers and sisters, Senator Bernie Sanders, let me hear you scream. Say I am. Brown, black, and white. We're all precious in God's sight. Everybody is somebody. Stop the violence. Save the children. If my mind can't conceive it, and my heart can't believe it, I know I can achieve it. I am somebody. I can vote, will vote, must vote, can vote, will vote, must vote. Let me hear you scream. I am delighted. First, I want to give a big shout out to the Howard University Gospel Choir. To my teacher and comrade, Dr. Cornell West. All the way from Silicon Valley, Brother Ben Jealous. Oh, Minister stand, Reverend Otis Small, Reverend Hatch. Ministers, please stand, Reverend Paul. All you are running for office, please stand. Give them a hand. Put your hands together one more time. This day takes on special meaning for us because it was yesterday, 51 years ago, we were coming out of Selma, Alabama. I get the word in Birmingham that Jesse Jr. had just been born. Yesterday was Jesse Jr.'s birthday. Give it up for Jesse Jr. Sunday, a week ago, was Sunday in Selma, Alabama. One of the driving concerns we have about this campaign, since we have people running who are friends and progressive with distinctions that we'll talk about a bit today, is why are we the first to be targeted for voter registration, targeted for voter turnout, but last to receive benefits? Number one in infant mortality, number one in short life expectancy, number one in unemployment, number one in lack of access to capital, number one in targeted home foreclosures. There's something wrong with this picture. We want to address that picture today. We set on a journey in 1965, and every time we lifted the bottom of everything else rose with us. Oldest African Americans have been denied the right to vote for 85 years, since 1880. Blacks couldn't vote, white women in the South couldn't serve on juries. 18-year-olds who serving in Vietnam could not vote. We could not vote on campuses. We could not vote bilingually. We could not get proportional representation in campaigns. We set out between 65 and 90 to change that formula. A factor in changing that formula. Can Dr. King get the Northern Nonviolent Movement? Can the rainbow have some white in it? We got some white in the rainbow. With the Burlington mayor in the rainbow, and we won his state in 1984 and 88. Give it up for Bernie Sanders. A traditional liberalism that we had to incorporate in the struggle to make it real, to change, to move from just complexion to direction, and to change our priorities. We have respect for, and I'm glad that Hillary and Bernie have chosen to focus more on issues than each other, because when the deal is over, this is an intra-squad game. When this is over, there'll be a Super Bowl November 8th. It's a Super Bowl. And there'll be two teams and two directions for our country come November 8th. I'm concerned, let me say to you today before I open up this discussion with Brother Bernie, the one thing worse than being denied the right to vote is having don't use it. You become so cynical or comfortable or afraid you don't use the power that you have. I am concerned that what are now red states, if we voted full strength, could be blue states. Cornell, South Carolina has a million people in poverty, Medicaid eligible, a $7 billion budget, and turned down $14 billion in affordable care. A million people in poverty. I'm also concerned that there are 900,000 blacks who are registered to vote. The Governor Haley won by 60,000 because 400,000 didn't vote. We have not earned the right to do less than our best. We were in Louisiana last weekend campaigning to get out to vote. 450,000 blacks unregistered. McCain and Romney won by 300,000. We did less than our best. Even in Michigan last week, 530,000 blacks registered in Detroit. 110,000 voted. Nobody has earned the right to do less than their best. And when you do less than your best, there is a day of reckoning. There's darkness in the clouds, but there is some despair. I want to ask you a very basic question, Brother Bernie. I've been wondering why aren't people voting? Some of the right wing say they're not voting because changes are taking place that they don't like. Many of the blacks who don't vote, the more I think about that, anger is expressed in cynicism. I registered, I voted, and life has gotten worse. What can we do to bring the water those roots to make them come alive?
Well, first of all, we have got to take a deep breath and recognize that among many other countries around the world, we have one of the lowest voting turnouts, not just black, but white, of any major country on earth. So let me just start off. And let me begin by telling you, I've known this man for a long, long time. He came up to Vermont in 1988. We took on the entire political establishment in the state of Vermont. He was not supposed to win in the state of Vermont. You won by a pretty good vote, didn't you? We had meetings, hundreds and hundreds of people. And I want to thank Jesse Jackson for the extraordinary work. Sometimes we take it for granted. But this whole concept of the Rainbow Coalition, this whole concept that the way we change America is not to allow the Donald Trumps of the world to divide us up, but to do what the Jesse Jacksons of the world have said is bring us together. That's the future. And that's what we're trying to do. And in many ways, Reverend, what we are doing in this campaign is not radically different from what you were doing back then. Same thing. We are saying to young people that if you sit aside and you don't get involved, other people are going to make the decisions for you, but those are not going to be the decisions in your best interests. But since 1988, we have seen some bad things happening. We have seen this disastrous Citizens United Supreme Court decision, which tells billionaires and Wall Street that they can now buy elections, spend as much money as they want on elections. And then what we saw is the undermining of the Voting Rights Act. And literally the day after that Supreme Court decision, you had governors and attorney generals working hard to make it harder for people to vote. Unbelievable. In fact, just the other day, and I'm proud to say this, in Ohio, we took a case to the courts because the Republican Secretary of State decided to change the rules and not allow kids who are under 18 today, but who would be 18 in November. He said they couldn't vote in the primaries. We took them to court. We won. That's changed.
Put your hands together.
All over the country, you know, you and I have been involved in politics. And you fought some tough fights, but it never occurred to you for 1 second to try to figure out a way to deny people the right to vote who might vote against you, right? Indeed. Your goal was to take your ideas to everybody and win every vote you could. But you got political cowards out there. Wow. You know, can you imagine, you know, it's like being in a boxing match and forcing one guy to fight with his hand tied behind his back. They're afraid of fair elections. Amen. So we are going to do it. I know you have ideas on this, but I think there is a lot of cynicism in this country. And here's what it's about, I think. You got a lot of people, whether they're white or black or Latino, they're working longer hours for lower wages. They turn on the television, nobody is talking about their lives in the media. You go to Washington and they're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars in tax breaks for the top 1%, and they're not worried that 51% of African American kids are unemployed or underemployed. So what we have got to do, and it is not easy, there is despair out there, there is cynicism out there, but we have got to get the word out that the only way we change things is when people become involved in the political process and they're prepared to stand up and fight. And let me just conclude by saying this. One of the exciting things, Barack Obama, in my view, ran a brilliant campaign in 2008. In the primaries and caucuses, the numbers were off the charts. I'm happy to say that in at least 2 or 3 states in this campaign, we have actually exceeded the turnout that President Obama had in 2010.
One of the things I've watched many of the discussions, they never discussed urban policy. Here in Chicago, we have 88,000 homes of vacant or abandoned buildings, 54,000 homes. The banks were found guilty in a lawsuit of targeting and steering black and brown homes. The banks got bailed out, the homeowners got boards, and they're locked out. They closed 50 public schools. With that, 5,000 teachers. With that, the 50 drugstores and 75 grocery stores closed around those places. The tax base went down, education based upon tax base rather than intrinsic, whereas you have one side of town with 25% unemployment, another side of the town with 3% unemployment, and suburb job owner signs. What would you do for an urban policy?
Well, the first thing we do is recognize and acknowledge the crisis that you just talked about. Because you can't go forward unless you are prepared to deal with the crisis. You talk about crises. Let me tell you this, Reverend. I'm going to answer your question in a second. I was in Flint, Michigan, a couple of weeks ago. I was behind closed doors in a quiet meeting with 7 or 8 people in the community. Honest to God, I have to give a speech later. It was very difficult for me to give the speech. I could not honestly believe what I was hearing was taking place in the United States of America in the year 2016. Can you believe listening to a mother who watched the cognitive destruction of her beautiful daughter? Can you imagine a mother seeing her children's mind deteriorate because of lead in the water in the year 2016 in America? Just a report came out the other day in Newark, New Jersey. Not as bad, similar problems. The first thing we have got to do is to recognize this is the wealthiest country in the history of the world. We've got to get our priorities correct. And getting priorities correct means investing in inner cities all over this country. How could it be? We just did a meeting about this a few hours ago. How do you have a situation where here in the city of Chicago, hundreds of millions of dollars are paid back to Wall Street for a very bad scheme, and yet at the same time, this city, as I understand it, has a $500 million school budget deficit.
Indeed.
All right. Get our priorities right means that you don't reward the illegal behavior of Wall Street by closing schools and firing children.
Well, we paid out $600 million in police misconduct because of suits, settlements of the $600 million.
Unbelievable.
And it's not over. And there's still some tapes yet to be uncovered. What should we do?
Well, first off, this issue of a broken criminal justice system has got to be a major priority. And if elected president, I will make it a major priority. What do? For a start, anytime a person is killed while being apprehended by a police or dies in police custody automatically triggers a Department of Justice investigation. Second of all, the word has got to get out that police officers, like any other public official, have got to obey the law. And if a police officer breaks the law, that officer must be held accountable.
So, Vernon, they're protected by a discipline code in the contract that says they have different rules by which they operate, by which they govern, and therefore it's almost difficult to fire them. And that's why they were able to withhold the tapes 13 months. And there are still tapes being withheld, and so far nothing has happened except one indictment.
Well, I think if cities, whether it's Chicago or any other cities in this country, if local government is not prepared to do the right thing, the federal government has got to be a lot more aggressive. And what I want to tell everybody here, you know and I know, that what we have been seeing on television in terms of the shooting of unarmed people some younger people think this is a new phenomenon. It's not a new phenomenon. It's been going on for a long time. The only difference is now people have cell phones and are videoing it. So I think that when you talk about criminal justice, you start off with the fact that we have 2.2 million people in jail, significantly African American, Latino, Native Americans. That is more than any other country on earth. That is crazy. All right? So, I mean, we could go on, but for a start, when you have 51% of African American kids unemployed or underemployed, I think it makes sense to invest in education and jobs, not jails and incarceration.
Well, in Cook County Jail has 9,000 inmates. 4,000 said to be medically seduced every day because of mental challenges. Some have been there 5 years in pre-trial detention, rotting in jail.
It's insane. Look, I mean, what can I say? We don't have in this country a mental health system that treats people who are in trouble. We don't have a mental health system that treats alcohol abuse or drug addiction. We criminalize those problems and you throw people in jail. People are not going to get better by rotting in jail. They're going to get better by getting the treatment they need.
Let me ask you another question. This is at the heart of the urban. There used to be a dream called urban reconstruction model cities. Now they close public housing and foreclose private housing, which is most people's first business at home and drive them in the tax-based crisis. When we have a problem in Baltimore or Chicago or Detroit, we see the Attorney General and the police chief, never the Secretary of HUD and the HHS, Human Services and Commerce and Labor. We think we need a White House conference on violence and urban economic reconstruction, a comprehensive plan.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Let's do that. I was in Baltimore in the neighborhood where Freddie Gray was killed. And what I saw again, like Flint, Michigan, was unbelievable. Here's what you had. In that area, you did not have a grocery store. You understand? In other words, there was not a store where people could go out and buy fresh produce or meat or whatever. All you had is these small mom and pop stores which sold beer and potato chips. You did not have, Jesse, a bank branch in that community. The only things available to people were this outrageous interest rates in payday lenders. Now, meanwhile, real unemployment in America, and I'm not telling you anything you don't know, it's not 5% when you add those people who have given up looking for work and are working part-time, it's close to 10%. One of the plans that I've been talking about in this campaign is to rebuild our crumbling infrastructure, including housing, with $1 trillion investment. So what you can do is kill two birds with one stone. You can put people to work at decent wages, rebuilding their communities.
But in fact, if we go from water bottlers to water pipes to reconstruction, and our youth have access to the trade unions, become skilled carpenters, where will the money come from?
Where would the money come from? This is the wealthiest country in the history of the world. Problem is, the top 1/10 of 1% now owns almost as much wealth as the bottom 90%. Wealthiest 20 people own more wealth than the bottom half of America. 58% of all new income generated today goes to the top 1%. Does anybody think that that is fair?
No. No.
All right, so what we are going to do, and we've laid it out, we're going to end the tax loopholes that allow corporations to stash their profits in tax havens, and we're going to use that money to rebuild our infrastructure. And you know what else we're going to do? I believe that in the year 2016, when we talk about public education, we should be including making public colleges and universities tuition free.
Where would that money come from?
I'll tell you where it comes from. I'll tell you exactly where it comes from. It comes from a tax on Wall Street speculation. Now, how does it happen that Congress could bail out Wall Street, but suddenly we don't have the money to bail out municipalities all over this country? So it's a question of standing up to the powers that be and tell them they cannot get it all.
Banks tell us they cannot lend now what they once loaned when homes and communities went down. It seems that in these areas of deprivation, whether it's Appalachia or in the city of Chicago or Pilsen, we need to have a development bank with long-term, low-interest loans. The Marshall Plan is not so much the size of it. 50-year loans at 2% government security. They were development based. Inglewood and Lawndale, as it were, Memphis needs inner cities, and Appalachia need development banks, not just conventional banks. What do you think about that?
I agree. You know, one of the things that we do.
Y'all get that? You know, the bankers downtown will say to us, they cannot lend. And because they will not lend to us on a measure, they run us to the payday lender, which is the back door of the bank. There is no bank for the undeveloped. So they're unbanked and locked down.
I got an amendment passed in the Dodd-Frank financial bill. And the amendment called for an audit of the Fed during the financial crisis. And what we found out as a result of that amendment is the Fed, Jesse, lent out $14 trillion at zero interest or very low interest rates.
Back up. Wait. Say that once. Say it real slow.
Okay. When the government bailed out Wall Street, it wasn't just the Congress voting $700 billion. In addition to that, what the Fed did is lend out trillions of dollars in short-term loans to virtually every financial institution in this country and central banks all over the world at zero interest or 0.5% interest. Point being, if the Fed can lend out 0 or 1% interest to financial institutions, I think that they can do the same to help rebuild this country.
One of the issues I'm concerned, Carmel and I were in Denver and Selma. The Voting Rights Act of '65, what made it different was it was protected by the federal government. In 2013, with the Shell Act, they removed the protective mechanism. They were able to reconfigure the districts and run white Democrats out and put blacks and browns in the back of legislature. So now we've gone back to the state's right to vote. We do not have the constitutional right to vote. We have the state's right. Every state has its own scheme. Would you support the constitutional right to vote?
I would. Now, you and I have talked about it. But most importantly to me, I'm looking for the best mechanism forward. Let's talk about it for a moment. Here is the bottom line. What many other countries do is say, if you are 18 years of age, you are automatically registered to vote. Right. And that is what I want to see in this country. No, all kinds of weird ID cards, and you have to pay to buy a government ID card, all that stuff. 18, you're automatically registered to vote. Now tell me how. You know something about this. What is the fastest and best way to get into that goal?
When you are born, there is a birth certificate. You die, there's a death certificate. We know everybody who's 18. You should take the political money out of voter registration. Right. And second thing is on-site, same-day registration.
Right.
if you were to leave here now and get a traffic ticket, while they're writing it up, if you did not pay one in Seattle, Washington, they know within 3 minutes. Right. So if they have that level of computer science for traffic tickets, they should apply to voting as well for democracy.
I agree.
Look, the president don't put you on the spot and you're the one running.
Our goal has got to be to have one of the highest voter turnouts in the world, not one of the lowest. And one of the ideas I worked on with Congressman John Conyers some years ago was making Election Day, a democracy day, a national holiday.
Let me go a step further. This audience, we're told of the kind of liberal school of thought that rising tides lift all boats. Or we came on different boats, we're in the same boat now. And that is not true. We came on very different boats. Those that landed at Ellis Island and those that landed at Charleston, South Carolina, carnival ships and slave ships, were two different ships. One landed as a commodity, one landed free. And now today, we were enslaved for 246 years. Then 4,500 lynchings between 1880 and 1940. There's no plan to target the deprived within the form of repair, so we're free but not equal. Would you support targeting those who have been deprived the most?
I would support radical efforts to rebuild every community in this country, focusing mostly on those communities that are most hard-pressed. Right now, and again, what is often lost in the discussion in the media is the fact that we are not a poor country. If we were a poor country, we would have a certain type of discussion. We would say, well, look, our goal is that every American should have health care as a right. But, we're a poor country. We don't have enough doctors. We don't have enough nurses. Does anybody here believe that if every other major country on earth can provide health care to all people, that we cannot do the same? Of course we can. This is not a medical issue. It's not an education issue. It is 100% a political issue. And by that I mean the people who have the wealth, the people who have the power want more and more and more, and they don't care about how many people they step on to achieve their goals.
Let me read this another way. President Johnson opened up the war on poverty in Appalachia, in Athens, Ohio. And by the way, there are 33 Ohio counties in Appalachia. Focus on Cleveland, Cincinnati, and Akron. There are 33 Appalachian counties in that state. His point was that when it's real dark, we all look real similar in the dark. He whitened the face of poverty and democratized the debate. By whitening the face of poverty, he removed the stereotype from poverty. And so Congressman Clyburn has a bill that goes something like 10, 20, 10. Those areas that have been in poverty for 20 years straight get a priority investment. There is no compensatory investment now targeted at those, and therefore those yachts do rise, but the boats at the bottom have not fundamentally moved.
I think Congressman Clyburn is exactly right. That's what I'm talking about. And that is targeting those communities that have sustained poverty for a very, very long time. And your point, if my memory is correct, in South Carolina, you mentioned they did not extend Medicaid.
Here's a state with a million people in poverty. 250,000 have no health insurance, with a $7 billion budget. I mean, that 45% of its state budget is federal. They refused $14 billion with a $7 billion budget, and the hometown of the governor, her hometown hospital closed. You raised another question. Should not, if you're giving 45% of federal money to a state, and it is getting federal protection and subsidy for its highways and airports, should they have the right to deny give that state a federal health plan?
I think what is clear is the federal government has a lot of leverage in that discussion.
That's why I don't sense that when they say we don't want federal government money. The interstate highway is federal. The airports federal. The ports are federal. The schools are subsidized. And yet we're not leveraging. How can a state say no? 1,000 people are dying a year from lack of access.
Well, I mean, to me, I'm on the committee that helped write the Affordable Care Act. And I got to tell you that nobody on that committee, Republican, Democrat, whatever, ever considered, to the best of my memory, for 1 second, that states would reject an expansion of Medicaid which was free, which did not cost them a nickel, and which in South Carolina, as I recall, would have resulted in the creation of tens of thousands of jobs.
Well, for Virginia around Texas has been an ideological rejection. Only Louisiana. In Louisiana, the Democratic governor last month, right, he signed the bill that day, and 300,000 came on Medicaid. But in Virginia around the Texas, they are rejecting federal money. I'm from South Carolina, and you from, say, Vermont. Federal government grants medical care. You can get it, and I can't. Am I left unprotected under the states' rights of prevailing with federal rights?
It's unbelievable. I mean, it really is unbelievable. And the answer is, I mean, how we deal with that and how we tell South Carolina that their African Americans and their whites and their Latinos are entitled to health care, especially as the government passed the bill to provide that health care. You know that I would go further and fight for a Medicare for all legislation which guarantees health care to all people as a right.
This week, Dr. Quentin Young, one of the leaders of the Comprehensive Health Care Act, died this week. We should give a special deference to Dr. Quentin Young.
Oh, I didn't know that.
He died this week. University of Chicago, man.
Dr. Quentin Young, I didn't know that he passed away. I've known him for a long time. What a wonderful man.
Wonderful man.
And he is one of the leaders in this country in the fight for what we call a Medicare for All single-payer program. And I'm sorry to hear that he passed away.
Brandon, what happens when the way this deal has come down, the reason we're in this bind, I keep trying to come back to it, we freed the bankers, locked up the children, shipped the jobs out, cut the folk off welfare, and ran them student loan debt. That's a mess. We need help. Got the point? Freed the bankers, locked up the children with 3 strikes, and then shipped out the jobs. So right now in Chicago, guns in, drugs in, jobs out, and no investment. We will need a president who can address that crisis.
Well, we need a president who can address that problem. But what we also need in this country is a political revolution. And Jesse, what I've been saying all over this country is a simple truth, and it's not a pleasant truth. If I were elected president tomorrow, do you think that I or you or anybody here could take on Wall Street and corporate America and the large campaign donors all by ourselves? The answer is no. These people have so much power. They have an endless supply of money. They buy and sell politicians. You threaten them, they're going to shut down here and move to China. The only way we beat them, and that's what, the Rainbow Coalition is about, it's what I call the political revolution, is bringing millions of people together around a progressive agenda. But there's nothing that you have ever said, or I have ever said, that is particularly radical. Every major country on earth guarantees health care to all people. Why can't we? Why does this country have more wealth and income inequality than any other major country on earth? Why do we have the highest rate of childhood poverty of almost any major country on earth? Why do we give tax breaks to billionaires and then see 50 schools in Chicago being shut down for lack of funding? Does that make sense to anybody? We're the only country on earth, rich or poor, almost the only, that doesn't guarantee paid family and medical leave. So a woman has a baby, she has to go back to work in a week or two in order to earn enough money to take care of her family. Every other country guarantees that woman months of time off to take care of her newborn baby. In other words, our priorities are absolutely backward. They are determined by the people on top who have incredible wealth. In the last 30 years, there's been a major transfer of wealth from the middle class to the top 1/10 of 1%. And what this campaign is about is ending all of that, rebuilding working families in this country and their community.
I want to raise this question with you, because the thing is, as we seek to democratize capital, then General Snap talked about this quite a bit. When the U.S. Olympic team plays China in China, we don't complain about the outcome because the playing field is even. Rules public, goals clear, referees fair, and scores transparent. So we've globalized capital, we've not globalized human rights and workers' rights and children's rights and environmental. What can we do to globalize human and workers' rights in trade policy?
What you say is that the United States is not going to have free trade agreements in countries where workers can't form unions, where there is child labor, where there is massive environmental degradation. It is unfair for American workers to be competing against people who are earning starvation wages. And one of the things that I have done from day one in the Congress, and where my views are very different from Secretary Clinton's, I have opposed all of these disastrous trade agreements which have ended up costing this country millions of decent paying jobs and pushing us into a race to the bottom. Now try to understand that today workers in the automobile industry who get a new job are in some cases earning half the wages that the older workers are earning. We're moving in the wrong direction. Instead of wages going up, they're going down. And that has to do with the race to the bottom and employers saying, if you don't take a wage cut, we're going to move to China, we're going to move to Mexico, and that is a trade policy that has got to be changed.
Before we go, I want to raise a concern, and I tried to avoid it to the very end, is that we share 2,000 miles of border with Mexico. They are our most organic neighbor. We'll forever be neighbors of Mexico. Yeah. We're working on turning Mexico into an enemy. And this is just the door to Latin America. And 2/3 of this hemisphere is Latin America, 1/3 English-speaking American. And it seems that we're insensitive to turning Mexicans into enemies and turning our backs on refugees. For those who are Christian, Jesus was a refugee. It's hard to worship a refugee on Sunday and lock refugees out on Monday morning, it seems to me. And then to target Muslims. There's something dangerous and toxic going on in our country today, and I have great anxiety about what we saw last night and how that could metastasize and spread.
Well, what Trump is doing is incredibly dangerous at so many levels. I mean, how do you have a president of the United States who insults Latin America and our Mexican neighbors? How do you have that? How do you have a president, a guy who wants to be president, insulting Muslims, one of the largest religions in the world?
There are more Muslims than there are Christians, and more Muslims than there are Americans. And so to attack them in that sense puts America in isolation.
Right, of course it does. But here's the guy who is also attacking women. And I want everybody here, because sometimes we forget this. Do you remember who was one of the leaders of the so-called birther movement? All right, it was Donald Trump. And what was that about? That was a very dangerous effort to delegitimize the President of the United States, to say, well, he really is not the President because he's not an American citizen. How dangerous is that to try to undermine in that deep way? You could disagree with Obama, that's fine, but don't delegitimize his presidency. And I've made this point because it's an interesting point. My father was born in Poland. President Obama's father was born in Kenya. Guess what? Nobody has ever asked me for my birth certificate. I wonder why. You know, what's going on here, I think, is there are a lot of older white people, people in their 50s, 60s, older, who are angry. And they have a legitimate reason to be angry, and that reason is they have seen the economy slip away from them. They have seen their jobs go to China. They are working, in some cases, longer hours for low wages. They're worried about their kids. But instead of looking at the cause of their problems,
scapegoating,
what they are doing is scapegoating, which has gone on forever. That's what demagoguery is about. To take people's fear and anger and turn them against minorities.
You know, some of them are angry. I think for two reasons. Some of them are angry at Abraham Lincoln. Really, ideologically, they're angry at Abraham Lincoln and the Emancipation Proclamation. Those who were Jefferson Davis Democrats in 1965 became Goldwater Reagan Republicans. So they've really just been Republicans for the last 51 years. So they're angry at Dr. King and the Kennedys as being transformers, but they're also angry at the loss of their jobs. So they're kind of angry at three levels, but the scapegoating is easy, simple, but very, very dangerous.
You know, in the 1950s, way back when, the lowest paid white workers in America, and they were really paid very low, were in Mississippi. They were paid nothing. And you know how the system got away with that? Because it was scapegoating. They said, look, you're not making any money, you can't afford food, you can't afford housing, you can't afford health care, you can't afford to send your kid to college because you're making nothing. But you know what you got? You could drink at that damn water fountain, and the black guy can't. Aren't you a lucky guy? You know? And that goes on. That's what scapegoating is about. And the antidote of that is to say, you know what? We're going to bring all of our people together to fight for decent wages and health care and education for everybody. We're not going to let them break us up.
Let me say in closing, this has been an interesting and significant conversation because I'm concerned that the fundamental right to vote must be protected by an amendment to the Constitution. I'm furthermore convinced that we cannot escape our history, the difference between immigrants and slaves as immigrants, or between poor people and the have-nots. And somehow there must be a restoration of a plan to target those who are most deprived, the people who work the hardest and at the most risk are paid the least. So we're facing living under stress and not living as long. And Brent, I would think that your thrust on Wall Street, I was told, we heard at the bank at the debate that night, that you have one issue. If the one issue is the vertebrae, everything else spins around that. Everything spins around access to capital, industry, technology, and deal flow. And that is missing. We're free, but not equal. Anything, and my last one would be that EEOC and contract compliance, those government agencies are not enforcing their own civil rights laws, and Civil Rights Commission is all but out of business. There once was a civil, here's my brother Hesburgh, there once was a Civil Rights Commission. That commission is basically out of business. Would you restore the Civil Rights Commission
Absolutely.
as an independent agency?
Look, the answer is yes, and the second answer is that federal contracts in all agencies of government have got to focus their attention in making sure that jobs are being created in underserved communities all over America. Frankly, that is not the case today.
As we prepare to go, Chris, who is a business guy, I saw Chris, people, Jonathan, the federal government itself has, say, pension funds. We're not getting a fair share of federal contracts. And the South Carolina has a 30% African-American population, get less than 1% state contracts. That's like a pattern. We found the same pattern in Silicon Valley. 189 board members of 25 companies out of Ben and I work together. 35 white women, 3 blacks on the boards. That scene is changing because we're working on it. But they are also getting government contracts, Bernie, and those contracts, the federal government investment is not being leveraged, not enforced. Federal law, civil rights is not being enforced.
If elected president, you and I and people in this room will work together to change that. Let me just, our time is running out. I want to thank you for the opportunity, thank everybody for being here, and just to remind everybody again that in the richest country in the history of the world, we've got to create a nation where our economy works for all of us and not just the 1%. Thank you all very much.
Let me say, all right, Bert. And that we have done in an attempt to be civil and put the focus on voter participation, voter registration, judge, voter turnout. We met today, of course, with my friend and brother, spiritual brother in so many ways, Bernie Sanders. Meet with Secretary Clinton on Monday. We were working to make the process work for all of us. And I'm glad that when there were attacks upon her, you chose to use moral authority to break the incivility and get back on the issues that matter. We must focus, say jobs, education, healthcare, justice, character. We all matter. Everybody is somebody. Stop the violence. Choose hope, not fear. Life, not death. Futures, not funerals. Graduation, not incarceration. We're all God's children. Everybody matters. One big tent. One big tent. One big tent. Feel the love. I want us to prepare to take our seats while we, for all kinds of security reasons, let it burn out. And then we'll see.